Now sometimes I get hold of a radio and I don't find anything broken on it, and from one point of view that's good because it's another radio to add to the collection and I don't have to do any work other than cleaning it up a bit maybe. On the other hand, it doesn't necessarily give us any video content because, we don't have to say, oh, the FM's not working or the AM is a bit noisy or another 6 AF117 transistors have expired or whatever. This is one such radio that hasn't got anything broken on it. And I almost feel that I shouldn't really like this radio, but I do. This is quite obviously a Sony CFM-A50 combined radio and cassette recorder. Quite young for this channel really. 1997 I think this was made. So mere Gen Z 20 something. Feasting on avocado toast and despairing of ever finding a home to call its own. Well, it's got one now. One of the things that attracted to me, I have to admit, was this lovely walnut finish here, which reminded me a bit of my Vauxhall Omega that I used to have back in the late 1990s, and I did quite like that car, although in the end it turned out to be quite expensive to run. This, I have to say, has a slightly higher quality feel than a Vauxhall. One of the things that strikes me about it is that they must have had some sort of design meeting at Sony when they came up with this, and they seem to have just got the suggestion box from the factory, tipped it up and used everything they found in it, whether it was a good idea or not, and not thought of putting in some things that were needed. As a result, it's got a number of special features which I'll go through. The first one, which I actually quite like, is this tuning scale. Now you can see it's on FM at the moment, and if I operate the wave change switch, it moves the whole scale round like one of the old turret tuners a bit, but it isn't a turret tuner, it's just a switch with a thing that moves a cylinder around. Interesting thing about this is that the FM scale is pretty conventional, goes up to 106 here, but actually the tuning will go up to 108. The medium wave is labelled in American style with tens of kilohertz. The long wave is labelled with kilohertz, but also has got station idents on it. Now, neither of the other bands has got station idents, and why did they do them for this one? I'm guessing it's because long wave is very much a Europe only thing, so they could put those in, whereas they could reuse the medium wave and FM ones in America or Japan. Maybe not Japan actually, because I think the Japanese FM broadcast band starts down a bit lower than 88 meg. Anyway, despite them putting all these station idents on, they've all gone apart from BBC here on 200 kilohertz, and that'll be gone pretty soon, I think. Now, like a lot of late 80s, early 90s stuff, there's a bit of discoloration of plastic gone on here, which isn't immediately obvious unless you look at a picture of the original. There was, if I look at that thing there is supposed to be bright yellow. What is it, I hear you ask? Do I hear you ask? I don't hear you ask. Anyway, that's just a marker that you can put on to mark one favourite station. Not particularly useful, doesn't do anything else, that's it. You can see the tuning indicator here, and it's like a two-pronged thing, and the reason for that is there's a little LED. If I switch it back to FM, I can probably demonstrate that. I'll just switch the radio on. I've got the volume down at the moment, but you can see there's a little red light there that comes on as you get on station. It's a bit fiddly, I'll tell you why. This set doesn't have a dial cord. Whoopee, you might think, because we really don't love dial cords very much on this channel. It has a sort of worm gear inside it to drive it, but it's not really quite as accurate as a dial cord. You're always sort of not quite there. There's a bit of, I'm trying to think of the technical term for it, but there's a bit of lag there, where it doesn't quite line up as well as it would, I think, with a cord. Nevertheless, it's good enough, and the little tuning indicator is a useful addition. Also, if you're not seeing it very well, you can press this light button, which gives it a nice crimson glow for a few seconds, and then goes out again. Does it? Yes, there it goes. Looking around the back, you've got a mains socket here, so you can power it from the mains, or you can power it from 4 D cells in this compartment here, which is quite well laid out. little pull-out drawer. I find it works better with the D cells than it does with the mains. The mains you get a bit more interference on the radio. I don't think they've screened the power supply off very well there, which is a shame. Also the switch here, which I think is to cut interference from the radio if you're recording onto the cassette. The aerial's interesting. It's not a telescopic aerial, you can't pull it out. It's a bit bendy, not excessively bendy, I'm not going to bend it too much. But yeah, it's fixed length, although you can move it about. I'm guessing there's a loading coil in there to make it electrically longer than it is physically. I'm going to go back to the front again and address this thing here, which is labelled Easy Listening Adjustment. I thought maybe the Easy Listening Adjustment was one of these dreaded taxes we were expecting in the budget in the UK in a few weeks' time. Put too much James Last on and your national insurance goes up. Whereas that might not always be thought of as a bad idea. That's not what it is. Let me demonstrate what the Easy Listening Adjustment in fact does. I'm going to try and get it onto a speech station because I don't want to get hit with copyright things. So let's do that first.
Have an immediate effect and move it.
Even for a customers, if you time it right, surge pricing means that you can benefit when demand is low. So fancy a pint at 3 in the afternoon, it's a bargain.
I certainly do. But I've got to carry on with this.
Price fixing and market competition, and yes, it may be more complicated to do so now, but it's not impossible.
So there we are with the normal sound. I'm now going to put the Easy Listening Adjustment
The
on.
minister said there were indeed a number of things that the government can do and should do about it. But the action they'll take will require politicians and regulators to be nimble, tech-savvy, and cunning.
Well, that's out then, isn't it? So what is it? It's sort of a tone control, really, but it's not really a tone control. It's basically a pound shot parametric equalizer. Let me explain. If I look at the operating manual, it shows you here that you can use it to pick out a particular person's voice in a multi-way discussion or something like that. Presume that only applies if you've ensured that the discussion is in 4 parts, like SATB, choir or something like that. If you look at the circuit diagram, they've used a whole stereographic equalizer chip for this. And you'd think, you know, I mean, it's obviously not costing them a great deal because it's a Sony chip anyway, and they must have had loads of them. Could they not have just put a bass and treble control in there? Or maybe, I mean, you couldn't have got a 5-band equalizer fitted in here, I wouldn't have thought. But they could have done something better than this, which to me is just like 12 versions of Total Pants, from briefs round to long johns. Other thing I noticed, earphone socket here, this does actually work. If you put a stereo 3.5mm jack in there with a modern pair of wired headphones, you do get both channels. That doesn't always happen with these things. Sometimes you get nothing, sometimes you get one channel. I think there was someone commenting on one of the other videos the other day that mentioned this sort of difficulty, and it's certainly a problem with the 70s stuff, but they seem to have got it sorted out by the 90s. Originally I thought that was around here because it says earphone socket. Where's it got? No, it's not earphone socket, it's earphone pocket. So there's a little pocket here you can put your earphone in. They obviously didn't because there's no earphone there now. Let's turn our attention to the cassette side. So in some ways it's a pretty conventional arrangement here. You know, we've seen lots of radio cassette recorders and the controls are pretty standard. There's an interesting addition here. I'll just put something on to demonstrate it.
North Coast Recollections. No people on the golf links, not a crack of well-swung driver from the 14th tee, no sailing, bounding ball across the turf, and lady's slipper of the fairway.
Now what you have is this thing called slow playback.
Rises Bray Hill and
Stepperwards, the sun sends Bray Hill's phantom stretching to the church.
I'm not sure what the point of that is, apart from making the late Bill Wallace sound a bit like Marvin the Paranoid Android. Perhaps it's useful if you want to hear the terms and conditions that get read out quickly at the end of adverts. Terms and conditions apply, 17.5% APR, you will not own this car. You know, that sort of thing. It would be more useful, I think, if it worked in record and it wasn't just a slow playback. because you could then extend how much stuff you could get on the tape. But I'll demonstrate the record.
So might say watch that tomorrow.
Channel 4 tomorrow evening, Smile.
Now, one of the things of the recording is you don't have to press record and play together, it does it for you. So if I do that...
this is a horror movie around the concept of a sinister smile that is passed from person to person, and if you get the smile, you're going to end up dead.
And if you like a war movie, In Which We Serve, BBC Two tomorrow, in the morning, strangely, 9:40, which is an odd one.
Yeah, you have to really hunt for these films sometimes.
Now, I'll just demonstrate that this does nothing.
Classic war movie, the survivors clinging to the life raft, talking about the ship that's just gone down.
Yeah. Do we like a bit of reality television? Is there anything you'd watch on that?
Let's just wind it back a bit, which would have been an easier thing to do if they bothered to include a tape counter amidst all the gadgets.
And if you like a war movie, In Which We Serve, BBC Two tomorrow, in the morning, strangely, 9:40, which is an odd one.
Yeah, you have to really hunt for these films sometimes, but of course, Noel Coward and David Lean, classic war movie.
Actually, the sound quality from the cassette is pretty good. I think you heard there. There's not a lot of difference audible on a little speaker, to be fair, and in mono, between what was recorded and what came back. Also, I put the wound flutter tape in this and measured it, and it came out about 0.08%, and that's not bad. My proper hi-fi cassette deck, my Technics, the BX404, was specified as 0.07. This is weighted RMS, for those who care about such things. And when I measure that, that comes out about 0.08, which is about the same as this. And they're both about the same age, so it's actually a reasonably high-quality transport, I think. Also, although it's got a permanent magnetic raise head by the looks of things, it has AC bias, and again, that's not particularly common in things of this type. Quite often you have DC bias, which makes your tapes rather noisy and not very pleasant, but this actually plays back and records pretty well. One of the more useless things I've seen is this thing here, this little yellow pip. Now, I don't know how well you can see that. So what does it do? It looks like some sort of button, but it isn't. I'll show you what happens. It's just a thing that the tape pushes when you put it in. So if I put that in there, that's flush with the tape cover. If I open it and put a tape in, then it's not. And so by, as it indicates on this little legend here, by feeling for that and checking that it's raised, you can see that there's a tape in the machine. What a great idea. Or you could just look through the window and see that there's a tape in the machine. Now, the other thing I'd say is missing from this, you can only record either the radio, which if you got this on radio, then you will record that. If you got it in the tape position here and you put it into record, then what you will be recording is whatever comes through this microphone here. Then what you will be recording is whatever comes through this microphone here. And that's not particularly bad. I mean, I'm a long way from that mic at the moment. But there's no line input, so you can't use it to record anything else other than the radio or the mic. I suppose that's not a massive blow and not what most people would have wanted to buy something like this for. I just think it's a bit of an omission and something that could have been fixed really easily, a bit like the tape counter. Wouldn't have cost much to do, rather than just being able to slow the playback down if you want to do Darth Vader impressions. I actually really like this set. As I said, I really shouldn't, because it seems to have been designed by an unfocused group, I suppose you'd call it. All sorts of rubbish in there, and important things missed out. But it's decent quality, decent sensitivity on the radio, decent quality of the cassette deck. So I quite like it. I'd recommend if you find a working one at a decent price, I'd give it a go. Well, that's all for this one. See you on the next one when something will almost certainly be broken.